Guys, it's Boxing Gossip here on a Monday for you, and you can tell this is an important video because I've even put on a tie for the occasion. I'm on my lunch break. Yesterday, at the time of filming this video, about 24 hours ago, I uploaded a video with some post-fight thoughts relating to Joseph Parker versus Alexander Dimitrenko. Currently, 24 hours after the event, that video is sitting on 5,500 views. About 220 people hit the thumbs up button, and I want to just say a massive thank you to everyone who's supported that video, everyone who's liked it, watched it, commented on it, shared it on social media, etc. You know, for me, as a small YouTube channel, it's amazing to get numbers like that, and it's amazing to have people from all over the world contributing to the channel, sending me messages and getting involved. So yeah, first and foremost, a massive shout out. Now, off the back of that video, I've received countless messages, and without exaggerating, I've probably received between 30 and 40 messages asking for me to discuss Joseph Parker versus Andy Ruiz. Now, clearly this is a fight that is capturing the public's imagination. Clearly people are interested in it, so if you want to hear me discuss it, let me discuss it here. And it's a fight that I'm interested in as well. Just to give the background, as you'll be aware, Tyson Fury is having some problems out of the ring at present. I've done a video on that separately if you want to check that out. That went up yesterday as well. But as a result, there is a strong suggestion that that belt, or one of his belts, the WBO belt, I believe, is going to become vacant. And should that be the case, there is a strong suggestion that Andy Ruiz would fight Joseph Parker for the vacant belt. It seems that negotiations have already begun and are pretty much finalised for this fight actually to take place. So it would appear that both parties are pretty confident that Tyson Fury is going to be stripped and removed of his status. And you know, we're yet to see if that will be the case or not. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to discuss what would happen if that were to be the case. So this fight, Parker versus Andy Ruiz, could potentially get made. Obviously, the disclaimer is at this point it hasn't been confirmed, it hasn't been announced, hasn't been confirmed or announced that Fury will even be stripped of his belt. But I guess if that were to happen, at least some entertaining and interesting fights such as this one could potentially be made off the back of that belt being vacant. So let's talk Joseph Parker versus Andy Ruiz. I've never been someone who's bought into the Andy Ruiz hype. Let me say that. You know, if you wanted to, and I'm not suggesting that you necessarily do this, but if you wanted to search on my channel, Boxing Gossip Andy Ruiz, you can see several videos where I've discussed Andy Ruiz and discussed my thoughts on him. Even relatively recently, there was strong rumour that he would fight Hughie Fury, a UK heavyweight prospect. And I did a fairly extended video on how I saw that fight going, Andy Ruiz versus Hughie Fury. And if you watch that video, and if you watch this video, you will understand from me that I am really not sold on Andy Ruiz. Essentially, I think he's a guy who could potentially look good against opponents not in the top 100, but I don't think I'm convinced he's the kind of guy who can step up from prospect level to elite top 10 level. And in fact, when I did my top 30 heavyweight rankings, I didn't actually include him, because if you look at the level of opposition he's been facing, the guy is yet to have notable wins. He hasn't really beaten anything in terms of the context of the heavyweight division. Certainly you would have to say that Andy Ruiz has actually been in with less opponents than Carlos Takam. You'd have to say that Andy Ruiz has been in with lesser opponents than Alexander Dimitrenko. I guess what he's bringing to the table against Joseph Parker is he's an undefeated guy, he's a youngster, he's a guy with his own momentum, his own ambitions. Dimitrenko, Takam, potentially they were guys who are coming to the opponent stage of their career. Whereas that's not really the case for Andy Ruiz. You know, Andy Ruiz is a guy who is still early on in his career. He's still got his own ambitions, and you know, he's got people behind him. He's with Top Rank, I believe, Bob Arum, and they will have their hopes and dreams to turn him into a heavyweight champion. So I guess he's in that phase of being slightly more dangerous, because an undefeated fighter is always more dangerous when he hasn't yet tasted and accepted victory. But how I see Andy Ruiz as a fighter, he's got fast hands. I actually think Andy Ruiz and Joseph Parker possibly have the two fastest hands in the heavyweight division. So it's going to be a lot of fast hands in this fight. Ruiz has respectable power, above average power. I'm not completely sold that he's this gigantic one-punch knockout artist that some people would have you believe, but he's got some power. My concerns about Ruiz have always been his conditioning. Boxing is not a sport where you have to be body beautiful. I don't believe you have to have a physique like Anthony Joshua or like Vladimir Klitschko to be a heavyweight world champion. I've never been impressed by the fact that someone's got bulging biceps or a rippling six-pack. Having said that, boxing is a uniquely physically demanding sport, and anyone who stood in a gym and hit a heavy bag for 3 minutes knows how physically draining the sport can be, let alone going 12 rounds with a moving opponent who hits like a train, And my concern with Andy Ruiz is when he steps up to fighting an elite level opponent, an opponent who makes him move, an opponent who's hitting him left, right and centre, my concern is that Andy Ruiz simply won't have the fitness, the endurance and the conditioning to go out of pace for 12 rounds. The guy is hideously overweight. He's a beast. He is not in a condition that any athlete should be in. I just think it's impossible to be as out of shape and overweight as Andy Ruiz is and to be able to fight at a good pace for 12 rounds. The guy reminds me of a slightly more skilled but slightly less disciplined Chris Arreola, and that says all you need to know really. He's been fighting at a low level. I mean, he's fought some borderline gatekeeper names. He fought the likes of Serhij Liakovic. He fought the likes of Tor Hamer. I understand he had an injury in the Liakovic fight, but he looked terrible there. He really laboured to victory, and after the first few rounds seemed to be quite low on gas. In the Tor Hamer fight, that was it was a good fight to watch, but he looked very, very defensively open. And for me, this is a huge step up for Ruiz, and this is actually a much bigger step up for Ruiz than it is for Parker. Parker, for me, should actually find this fight easier than he did the Carlos Takam fight. Ruiz is a danger. He's unbeaten, he's young, he's got fast hands, he carries power. And it may well be that he's the hardest puncher Joseph Parker's ever been in with. I certainly haven't been sold as to the punching power of Joseph Parker's previous opponents. So it may be that Ruiz carries a bit more power than what Parker's used to. And as a result, he's going to have to keep his hands up, he's going to have to keep his chin down, and he's going to have to move his head, because Parker's defence has been questionable at times during his career. But fundamentally, I do believe that Parker should have the beating of Andy Ruiz with a little bit to spare. I see Parker as a top 10 heavyweight. I see Parker as having the potential upside to be a top 5 heavyweight. I don't see the same in Ruiz. He's too easy to hit, he's too unfit, and I don't think he's got the experience that a guy like Joseph Parker has. I don't think he's had going the distance fights against a guy of the level of Carlos Takam. I don't think he's had those sort of names put in front of him at this stage. I think Parker should have a real advantage in movement. I think Parker should have a real advantage in terms of stamina. And the way I'd like to see Parker take this fight is to not do anything silly in the first 2 or 3 rounds and to establish the jab. I think he's probably a bigger man than Ruiz in terms of his height and his frame, and that jab is so key for Parker. Parker's jab is very, very good, but as I've always said in this channel, and I've been saying it now probably for 3 years, he doesn't use his jab correctly. When he throws the jab, it's a very, very, very useful punch, but what he's not doing is doubling it up. What he's not doing is changing levels with it. He's not touching the body with it. He's not going body head. He needs to establish that jab as a battering ram. He needs to land it with regularity on Ruiz from an early stage. He needs to dissuade Ruiz. He needs to start marking him up. He needs to keep Ruiz off using that jab. And he needs to be careful of the early exchanges. Because when you've got a guy like Andy Ruiz, who's got fast hands, who's got a bit of power, but fundamentally is hideously out of shape, they're at their most dangerous in the first and second and third rounds. Before that gas tank has started to empty, that's when they're at their most dangerous, and that's when you're at your most vulnerable. So for me, Parker's going to have to be very, very mindful to box and move for the early rounds. I don't want to see him with his back up against the ropes. I want to see him keeping distance, keeping range, using that jab and using his footwork as the main way of keeping that range. And I think if he does that, he should really find this fight relatively comfortable. I don't think Ruiz is going to be able to jab with him. I don't think Ruiz is going to be able to move with him. And as the fight gets long, I don't think Ruiz is going to have the stamina to, to stay in the fight. I really don't. Even if Ruiz turns up to this fight in the best shape he's been in for some time, fundamentally, Andy Ruiz is a guy who has spent the last couple of years being 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds overweight. And even if he is able to go and lose 50 pounds for this fight, the damage of having that extra fat, that needless blubber on him for years is going to show. He's not going to be able to turn himself into a guy who's got a massive engine as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's that key. I expect Parker to win this fight. I actually expect Parker to win the fight in more comfortable fashion than he did against Carlos Takam. Because I don't think Ruiz is going to have the engine to cause some of the problems that Takam did cause on that fight. But what Parker needs to show here is the experience he has gained from those big fights and the discipline. People were saying he started to show improved head movement against Dimitrenko. Need to see more of that against Andy Ruiz. People are saying they're impressed by his jab. We need to see him really utilising that jab in different ways against Andy Ruiz. If he keeps it smart, if he keeps it disciplined and tidy for the early 2 or 3 rounds, I think he's cruised to a win. I think either he wins comfortably on points, because I do believe he's got the superior boxing and skill set, or potentially he could stop Ruiz in the middle to late rounds, because Ruiz is going to fade, especially if Parker can land some nice punches to his body, and what a body it is, hey. So that's my thoughts on this fight. I don't see Ruiz as the test that some people do. I'm not sold on Ruiz. He's not, for me, in the top 30 heavyweights. I think he's probably somewhere between 35 and 40. He's beaten a very low level of opposition. He hasn't always looked fantastic doing it. He's looked defensively frail. He's looked out of shape. He's looked poorly conditioned. And I do think that Joseph Parker, with his experience, with his athleticism, with his punch variety, and most importantly with that jab, if managed correctly, I do think Joseph Parker should win a relatively comfortable fight here. Let me know your thoughts. How do you see this fight going? How much of a threat do you see Andy Ruiz to a guy like Joseph Parker? If you've enjoyed the video, please take the time to hit the thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel or you haven't subscribed before, please press subscribe now so you can check out all of my other videos. Many thanks for watching.